Well, welcome everyone. This is Don Giannatti, Lighting Essentials and Project52.com. And today we're going to be talking to Calgary photographer, commercial photographer, John Sharpe, Sharpe Shots Photography. John's been doing this for quite a while. He's got a rich and robust portfolio and a great client list. And he lives in the great frozen north half the year. He's always sending me pictures of Calgary that looks like a ice cube up there. So we're going to chat a little bit with John. He's a commercial photographer, and that's what we talk about at Lighting Essentials and on Project 52. So without anything else, I'm going to welcome John. John, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
Very good. It's a little milder up there now, isn't it?
A little milder. Yeah, we're up to about 24 degrees today, Celsius.
And that's what, 80?
Yeah, probably 20, 23, 24 is about 80.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all, and it never gets too hot besides that.
Yeah, it got down to 82 last night here.
No kidding.
So everything's relative, my friend.
You know how to have fun.
So how long have you been a photographer?
Well, as a working pro,
Yeah.
22 years.
And before that?
Before that, I got my first camera, a Pentax ME Super, in 1978.
Wow. So you were a photographer before you went professional.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, these days that's almost sacrosanct, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It just doesn't happen.
It's like you get your business license on the way to pick out your camera.
Yeah,
It's quite a shame,
that's right.
actually, to do that. I'm always telling the students at Project 52, I'm always saying first you have to be a photographer. Then once you are a photographer, you can start thinking about ways to monetizing that. Because
That's right.
first you have to be a violin player before you get a job in the symphony. They don't
That's
hire
true.
you after you buy your violin and say, hey, no matter, just you can sit second chair and I'm sure you'll catch on. It
Yeah.
just isn't done.
Well, oddly enough, they do that now, eh? They do.
Yeah.
You know, oddly enough, they'll hire anybody with a camera these days, right?
Yep.
Especially
And that's
if you got
and it shows, and it's I think the backlash is there. I think some of the bigger brands are going out of their way to hire better photographers,
I agree.
photographers that do a spectacular job because they've begun to see what hiring a less than good photographer can do to their bottom line.
That's true.
And especially when you're talking about things like fashion or real estate or et cetera, it's all in the presentation, and that's what commercial photographers are good at.
That's right. Well, it's these days the guys that know presentation is the most important thing are the first guys to open up their wallets and go, let's do it properly.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So you started with film.
Oh yeah.
Are you still shooting any film at all, or are you
Yeah,
have you made the switch to digital?
I sold all my film gear in probably 98, in around there. Yeah, about 6 years after I went pro. As soon as the first little digital cameras came in, I spent 2 years on a Nikon Coolpix. I did my commercial work on a Coolpix, 6 megapixel.
Wow.
I'm not kidding you. And you know what? I never had a single complaint. They went, "This is great. It looks fantastic." It went online just because 97% of it, I don't print anything anymore. Nobody asks for prints. You mention prints, and they're going, "No, I don't know. What would we need prints for?" Very seldom.
Most of your clientele's looking for stuff for the websites.
That's right. That's right. That's the very first stop is for the website. So now today I posted something of a very, very, very tall high-rise in downtown Calgary that they want prints of for their sort of office portfolio, and that could end up going 8 to 10 feet high from a 5D Mark III, but that's very irregular. That doesn't happen very often.
Very cool. So you're a Canon shooter then,
Canon shooter.
and you have a little camera you like a lot too. I think we talked about.
Sure, I get the Fuji XE2, and I love it.
Yeah.
I had the X100 originally, the very first X100 that came out,
Mm-hmm.
and the files were absolutely amazing. And the camera was absolutely terrible to use. It was just, the whole interface was awful. So I sold it, and I sold it. I took a beating on it for what I sold it for. It was still on warranty. It had 2 months left on the warranty, and I sold it for $700 or $800, something like that. I lost about 700 on it anyway. And the long story short was, I thought one of these days they'll bring out a camera that I have a lot of fun using, and it's great.
Yeah,
XE2.
I think the mirrorless is where things are going. I really do.
That's where it's going.
Yeah.
Pentax just announced their first one the other day.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yep.
So tell us how you got started. When you were you had your camera back in the day, and then you decided you wanted to be a professional photographer. I mean, that's what happened to me. Was I'd never even thought of it as being a career, and a neighbor hired me to do a photograph, and I asked, I mean, do people do this? And he kind of laughed. He goes, "Yeah, all the time." And I thought, well, this sure beats working in a warehouse.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, it started with I had a wedding to go to, and years and years and years and years and years ago, in the early '80s, I was married, and my wife and I went down to this wedding, and I had a Vivitar 110 camera. I'm not kidding you, a Vivitar 110. And I knew that it was going to be terrible and the photos were going to be awful, and I didn't know anything about photography. But we came back from Claresholm, which is about an hour and a half south of Calgary, got into town really late, stopped at a 7-Eleven to buy some coffee for the morning, and I made sure that my wife had a good view of where I was standing. And I reached in my jacket pocket and I pulled I just popped the Vivitar out so it fell out and smashed on the floor. Because it was almost Christmas time, right? And I think that Vivitar at the time was $49, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Knew that I wanted a little Pentax and ME Super. So under the Christmas tree was a $249 with a 50F2 Pentax ME Super. And I loved it. It was a great camera. So it was my first foray into shooting film properly, and it was an adorable little camera, and I spent years with that. And then finally, I was a musician for quite a few years, and that sort of dried up, as things are wont to do. And I thought, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, I kind of like this camera thing. I'd like to go learn about cameras. So I went to a pro shop, and I haunted the hell out of them for weeks, and I said, I want to work here. And they said, we're not hiring. And I said, okay, I'll see you next Saturday. I went back in on the next Saturday. I said, I want to work here. We're not hiring anybody. I said, I'll see you next Saturday. And this went on about 3 times, and they finally said, well, why do you think we should hire you? What do you know about cameras? I said, they had a shutter button and one of them aperture things, right? So why should we hire you? I said, well, you've got about 6 stores in Calgary. I will be as good as the very best salesperson that you have in all 6 stores in under 6 months. And I said, on my 6-month anniversary, if that's not true, I said, you can come in. You don't even have to write me a final check. Just say, hey, guess what? Today's the day. Now get the hell out. And within 4 months, I had my own store to manage. And that's how I got started. And up here, and it's also part of PMA in the States, they have a program called Certified Photographic Counselor. And the retail guy that you work for can pay for you to write an exam. If you pass that exam, and 17% of the guys that write it ever do, you get this little diploma calling you a certified photographic counselor. And that sort of gives you the street cred in the stores with the guys that are buying. And it's quite effective. And it was I got my CPC. I did it for about 10 years and then decided that it was time to make the leap. Because back in the early 80s, when I was doing camera retail, pretty well everybody there was a wannabe pro. But they were too afraid to go out on their own. How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to pay the lights? What am I going to do? How am I going to pull all this together? So they did, but it took them, sometimes took them 3 to 4 years in the stores to get enough nerve up to jump out and do what everybody seems to be doing with no problem these days. So that was the story of how I got into going pro.
What was your first client? Can you remember?
First client. Wow. You know what? Off the top of my head, that would have been 92. It was 22 years ago. I can't say. I can't honestly say I do. Right? They were all small jobs. I didn't do. Oh, I know my first client. Yeah, a friend of mine bought a magazine in Calgary at the time, and was actually just the sort of, let's call it, in-flight magazine for a local theater. And it was just something for these guys to read while they were waiting for the matinee to start. And it was called Cityscope. And he bought Cityscope magazine and turned it into a much bigger affair. And I shot Cityscope from, now this is a guy that had never shot anything for a living. I shot Cityscope from cover to cover for 2 years, the entire thing. And it was big production stuff. I mean, we're talking, multiple lights and groups of, 10, 15, 20 people on, bar patios, crazy stuff, where it was just, that was the fun days of being able to experiment. Plus, you were shooting film, so you knew, you kind of hoped you'd get it right. Thank God for Polaroid backs. I don't have to tell you that, right?
Yeah.
I bought a Hasselblad, and with the Blad, I used to use Blad like everybody chimps now. The check image preview, everybody chimps the back of the camera. That's all the Blad was for, was to run Polaroid, stick it under your armpit for 2 minutes so it was nice and warm and toasty, peel it back and go, no, and I'd shoot 2 boxes of Polaroid, and when I got exactly what I wanted, I'd load 1 roll of 120, whack off 3 frames, and that was it. Done. All right? But that's how I started my career, and the nicest thing was I wasn't a people shooter. I was not a people shooter, and it scared the daylights out of me. They wanted me to go shoot who? But this was a people-oriented magazine, and there were 60,000 copies on the street at the time. 60,000 copies. So it was a big city publication, and I was the only guy taking pictures. So I did that for about maybe a year and a half, and I finally begged them to get somebody else in. I said, look, it's the John Sharpe show, and this isn't good for me. It's not good for the magazine. We need a little bit extra talent in here. So let's get one. I know a couple of good shooters, and we got a couple of guys in that helped out for a while. Eventually, the magazine folded, and then I moved on to doing commercial. I did editorial maybe for the first 6 or 7 years that I shot, and I haven't done editorial since. For some reason, I found that the magazine editors thought that you could take a photo credit and stick it in the bank machine, and somehow magically that would change your bank balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Photo credits never did, and no matter how many I put in the ATM machine, I never found that it changed my balance one little iota. So, they were paying at the time $65 a shot for Wear magazine, which is, I'm sure they've got Wear down there as well. Go shoot a picture of this, go shoot this restaurant, $65 a shot. You got a lot of shooting to make any money, but this is also in the very early 90s. Right? So I did editorial for probably 6 or 8 years, and then just said, enough of that. I did a lot of weddings, a lot of portraiture, and still I don't do weddings anymore. There's just way too much work now that it's gone digital. The good old days of dumping the film through the lab door at midnight have long since gone. Right? But I don't do weddings anymore. I just stick with commercial and portraiture, basically. A lot of interior work.
Now, I was going to say your specialties these days seem to be a lot of commercial real estate
That's
and
right.
interiors.
That's right.
And people.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you take us through a couple of your favorite shots?
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about what makes them special for you, and
Okay, let's go to I have a little arrow on my site. You can see some of the thumbnails. I like I'm just going to minimize this screen here. Okay, I like I'm a big fan of home theater.
mm-hmm.
I love it. I as a matter of fact, I don't know what it is. It's no different from shooting a living room. Really, it's exactly the same technique. But I don't know whether it's the flashing lights and the screens and the control panels, but I love shooting home theater. I could shoot it all day. And there's a shot that I did for friends of mine. And actually, these guys were pretty pivotal in what happened with me, because when I had this Coolpix, the original Nikon Coolpix, I thought I'd like to do panoramas. I'd love to do panoramas. Once upon a time when I was in retail, Fuji brought in a 617 in a big aluminum case and said, "Hey, you want to play with this for a week?" And I said, but not really. I didn't even know how to load it. It was 120. Anyway,
2 shots a roll or 3 shots a roll?
It was, but I think 3 shots a roll.
3 shots a roll, yep.
And they were spectacular. But you got to remember, at that time also, nobody had a neg carrier that would do anything. So the best you could do with it really was print contact sheets. I mean, you could send it off to a printer, of course, but if you wanted to look at it, you had to put it on a light table with a loop, and that was the best. That's the best you were going to get. So I thought, okay, it might be a lot of fun. Let's take it out. And they finally pressured me one night. God, come on, man, we got to get this camera back. And I said, all right, give me one more day. Give me one more day. And I said, I think I got a little thing that just showed up. I said, give me one more day, and I'll go out tonight, take some pictures. So I went up on what's called Scotchman's Hill here in Calgary, which kind of overlooks the entire downtown core, and I took 3 shots, dusk shots with the Fuji. Spectacular camera, absolutely spectacular. And I got the photos back, and it was seminal for me, because I got the photos back. It was all done on good E6, and I looked at these photos and I was mesmerized with this panoramic effect. I thought, my God, that's incredible. And I thought, I'd love one of these cameras, but what am I going to do with it? And if you were in the position where you could have had enough cash to have that as a discretionary camera, honestly, you could have made a living off that 617 hands down, literally, because there was nothing like it at the time. And for that kind, what's that?
There's no digital equivalent. Of course, we stitch now.
That's right, we stitch now. But back then, no.
The stitching doesn't look the same as that camera.
No, I know.
The film and the lens move together. Remember that?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
The film would be transported slowly to one side while the film was panning to the other side. So you didn't get that sort of...
Well, actually, no, that was fixed. You're thinking of a Noblex or something, or a Widelux.
Yeah, Widelux. Oh, that's right. That's right.
The Fuji was a fixed 617 film gate, and the lens was fixed on there. But I've got a theater shot up there. I think you can see it right now with Star Trek on the screen.
Yeah.
That's a 2 or 3 shot stitch, and they have a panorama program called PT GUI, which is spectacularly good. But you can see the very, very slightest bit of curvature over the screen on the top and the bottom, and then as you can see on the right wall, okay, you can also see a little bit of curvature there where the binding is at the top of the roof, right? You're never going to get rid of that if you're rotating the camera around the nodal point of the lens. The edges are never as close to the film, or sorry, they're different. They're in a different distance from the film or the chip, sorry, than the center of the lens. Right. So as you rotate, you're going to get some of that distortion. The secret to that, if you want to make it look good, is do as few stitches or shots as you can, and stitch them together with a proper projection. There are different projections in these panorama programs, and if you use some that are a little less quote unquote affected, then you can get a pretty decent view of that. There's no way you'd get that theater in. And as a matter of fact, the guys that I did these shots for are here locally, and they're really, really nice guys that own a company called K&W Audio here in Calgary. The very, very, very first shot I ever shot in a panorama of any kind was with the Coolpix on a ball head, and none of this was properly calibrated. I had no idea you had to calibrate them. So it was on a Coolpix with a ball head, and literally I sent the thing over that afternoon, and they said, "Oh my God, And I said, what? And they said, you can see, I said, the entire theater, can't you? Down, literally down one wall and down a completely different wall, corner to corner, everything. You can see the whole theater. And they said, we've never seen anything like that. And that was the start of me in panoramas. And I shot panoramas for years and years and love them. I still do. I still have a pan head called a Nodal Ninja, which is perfectly calibrated for my 21 mil Zeiss. And that, incidentally, that shot that you're looking at on screen, that is with that 21 mil Zeiss, and it's a remarkably beautiful lens. You can feel the leather on the back of the chair. You can actually see the grain. It's that good. So it's pretty nice.
Cool. Very cool. What's the is the market up there still dominated by real estate? And
It's better up here. Yeah, it's better up here than it is down there. We never had that housing bubble like you guys. I mean, it affected things, but right now it's we're out of work. Us photographers are out of work because there is literally a gold rush to buy property up here. People are going crazy trying to get a new house, and they will settle for anything, literally. And right now, as a matter of fact, I had a guy that was selling his place way the heck out on the edge of and this will probably be 30 kilometers from where I live. I'm right downtown, in the middle of downtown. He lives about 30 kilometers away. I shot it on a Friday night. I posted the stuff. He posted the stuff on MLS Saturday morning. And within 48 hours, it was sold, and they had multiple bids, and it was sold unconditionally for 25% more than he was asking.
Wow.
It's crazy. They'll do anything to buy a house up here. So right now, of course, you try to convince a realtor that, hey, I think good photography would really make a difference. Because why? The last thing I need right now is good photography. I can't find product to sell. And I have 2 or 3 realtors that I work with on a regular basis. And honestly, they just can't get product. They can't find new houses to list. And if they do, and they put it on MLS, it's gone right away. So right now, real estate is in that one of those flux situations. I've seen it where they're begging you to go shoot it in the past, but not lately. Right now, they can't find enough product to sell. So,
well, they definitely things go in a circle.
Oh, absolutely.
What goes around will come back around. That's for sure.
It's always cyclic. It really is.
Tell us a little bit about your people work.
People work was a gift from, let's just see if I can go find, let's say, we'll go here. I'm shopping. I don't know what's on the site very much. This is, let's see here. All right. There. That's better, right? And I do love dogs. Anyway, that was actually, the shot on the left was shot with a Leica and a 135 on something, probably Reala. And the shot on the left, or on the right, sorry, the girl with the dog, that was shot with a Mark III, right? I got my people skills from not having any choice. I had to shoot it. I absolutely had to shoot it when I was doing the magazine. That was their mandate. They were doing, lots and lots of personal profile stuff, and you either did it or you didn't shoot. It was as simple as that. You absolutely had to do it, or you weren't shooting. So I got into it, and I learned to like it, and it's still, of all the stuff I shoot, it's my favorite. I love shooting people.
So would you say that that shooting for the magazine, shooting that high pressure stuff with time constraints, that gave you a good footing then for the commercial work?
Superb question. Absolutely. Because a lot of cases, you'd have a guy that would say, look, I got 15 minutes, and that's it. At 15 minutes, I'm gone. And there's no way you would ever show up to a shoot and start setting up. You had to have it lit. You had to have it, all your lighting ratios figured out. Everything had to be good to go. And then you would sit there until a guy walked in. And that was it. And he would walk in and say, what do you want me to do? How's my tie? That's it. And he'd check his hair and you bam, 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 bam. And like 10 minutes later, he'd be shaking your hand and say, well, good. They don't even care about seeing it. These guys are pretty high-power executive guys, and they don't even care if they see it. Good. You got it. They got everything you need, and you're done. And then you've got an hour to pack all your stuff up and take it back down to the vehicle, right?
Right.
And all of it was location. And probably one of the nicest things that ever happened to me, I have never owned a studio in all the time I've been shooting. Never, ever, ever owned a studio. One of the nicest things that ever happened to me was having to shoot on location. And it started out, there was 3 things that changed. The first thing was that I would have to go and get there and go, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know whether, what the surroundings were like, whether it was noisy, there was other people there. I never knew what I was going to get. And the first thing was the ability kind of soaked in where you would go, okay, I don't know, Don, why don't we use, okay, that corner over there. We'll just set up in that corner. That was the first thing. The second thing that happened was, oddly enough, I used to get over there and I have a rough idea what I wanted to do. And things usually seem to fall in line. I'd be able to sort of pre-visualize the shot a little bit. And then stage 3 was literally, I could walk in and go, okay, I know exactly how it's going to look. I could see it in my head before I ever pulled a camera out of a bag. And literally all I had to do was, and I said to a lot of clients, if I can see it in my head, I can shoot it. Doesn't matter. And I always said I can get you a black cat on a black couch in a room with the lights turned off at midnight, and we'll still get you what you want. And maybe I'm lucky. I'd call it fluky, whatever. But in 22 years, I have never, ever walked away from a shoot where I didn't get what I needed before I was done. Always. I've never been stiffed and had to go back the next day, ever.
That's and I think that happens when you first become a photographer.
That's right.
Then you hone your skills in the way that you have to hone your skills, because for me, commercial photography is all about solving problems.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
If there was no problem to solve, they could get anybody to shoot it.
That's right.
Today with digital, it's even more. If all you need is a snapshot, take it on your iPhone.
That's right.
But if you need a problem solved, you're going to have to go and have somebody with, I call it visual literacy.
Yes. Well, I say, and listen, I couldn't agree with you more. I said, I've got a LinkedIn profile, as most of us do, and I said, I don't take pictures. That's not my job. I solve problems, because everybody that comes to you has a problem. How do we make this look good? How do we market this? How do we put this in the best light? How do we shoot this so it doesn't look flat and shot with an on-camera flash? How do we make this person look approachable? How do we? And that's really what we do. If you're any good, if you're worth your salt, then you're way past the point of taking pictures. It's all about how do we fix this and present it to make it look good, and that's what they're paying you for, is to solve that problem first and foremost.
Exactly.
And if you can say you solved the problem, you'll get a return customer for good.
Yep. That's why we carry redundant cameras and redundant lenses and redundant lighting, because we're there to solve a problem.
I always had 3 of everything. You bet.
Yep. We're not there to, quote, take a picture.
No.
That is the end product, but they're hiring us for something more than that.
That's right.
I'm always telling my students to, number one, show me something I haven't seen before, of something that I've seen a million times. If you can do that, you've caught my attention. And then show me how you can provide a solution to a challenge.
Exactly.
So, lately I see a lot of portfolios. I see, John, I see a lot of portfolios, and I see, 20-somethings standing in front of pale backgrounds, shot with a, one light over the camera.
That's right.
Which is interesting, for the first 3 or 4. But you haven't shown me anything
Oh, I know.
that you can do, except bring your friends into a studio. And bringing your friends don't count because you guys could be there for 6 hours. I need to know that you can do a shot like this
That's
in
right.
10 minutes.
That's right.
No excuses. The adrenaline junkie of being a photographer is the fact that every time we step to the plate, using a baseball analogy,
Mhm.
every time we take a bat and step to the plate, we are expected to hit a home run.
That's
There
right.
is no infield doubles in commercial photography.
There's no options. That's right.
You've got to come back with something great. Now,
That's
does that mean every shot is the greatest shot you ever took? Nope, but it's the greatest shot that could be done that day with those
with those
circumstances
circumstances.
by you.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things that really affected my style was in '84. My dad passed away, and he really didn't have a hell of a lot of money left over when he was gone. He was living in a senior's home, and I think he had maybe $7,000, and he left each of his three kids $2,500, and that was it. That's all we got. So my kid brother went out and partied. My sister bought a washing machine, and I thought about, well, what would he want me to do with this money? And I put it in the bank, and I didn't touch it. And it was a year and a half later, and I thought he would want me to do something that would have an impact on me and something that would never, like I would always have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had this lonely orphan Leica R4 with a 50 millimeter lens sitting in the store, and it was an exorbitant amount of money. It was, back then, it was, I think, well over $3,000 without the lens. The body was way over $3,000 without the lens. And I thought, well, I don't really know what to buy. Leica said, the Universal Leica system is a body and a 35 millimeter f2.8 and a 90 millimeter f2. And they said, if you got that, that's all you'll ever need. And I thought, well, that's a little bit bold, but we'll try that. And I got at the time what was something called Best Net. And Best Net basically got me that camera and those two lenses for around $3,000, which was great for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never seen, even though it was SLR, I was a tripod baby at the time, really big discipline, always put everything on a tripod. I had never, ever seen anything come out of lenses like I'd seen out of those Leicas. I'd never, ever, ever seen it. And I got into this personal vision quest, for lack of a better word, of trying to bring out the maximum amount of quality in that camera. I thought, okay, what would make it even sharper than it already is? So obviously tripod, obviously cable release, or even better, self-timer, obviously Kodachrome 25. So you plant the legs, you make sure they're exactly where you want them, you bolt the thing down, you put it on self-timer, and you're shooting Kodachrome 25. I bought a $300 slide loop, German slide loop, and the stuff that came out of that thing with one eye closed, you'd swear was three-dimensional, was totally 3D. While I was constantly mesmerized with that effect about how incredibly sharp these guys could make those lenses. And with Kodachrome, well, nobody ever touched Kodachrome. I don't think they ever will. Kodachrome 25. And I started getting more and more and more and more into completely literal photography. So it had to be, for lack of a better term, I'd call it hyper-realistic. It had to be hyper-real. It had to be realer than real, and it had to just literally stand off the page. And so that affected my style from here on in. So everything you look is extremely literal that I shoot. It's when I sit down and play around with the iPhone and run it through Hipstamatic or whatever, it's refreshing because it's nowhere near my style, not even close. So it's nice to be able to sit down and move things around and push things around and make things look like they don't look for a change instead of trying to make them look more and more and more like they do, which is really what my fixation is. So I've got a huge fixation with that sort of thing. Here's an idea. This comes from, let's just see if we can find this shot. You've seen it already. Am I missing this? Well, I'll give you an idea. This is fine. That shot with my 21 mil Zeiss Distagon. And there's German lenses, and I read many years ago. They said the thing that's different between the Germans and the Japanese will go out and shoot test targets. And they shoot test targets till the cows come home. The Germans, the Leica guys would say, here's every lens that we make, take them all out, use what you want, bring back what you don't use that often, tell us why you like the ones that you did, and then we're going to analyze your photos like crazy and find out if there's any way we can improve those images, optically. And they did. I mean, and I'd read many years ago that if you take a German lens like a Zeiss Distagon, or if you take a Summicron or any of the Elmaritz, any of those Leica lenses, and the Zeiss lens, as a matter of fact, and you actually look at them on a test bench compared to, say, a good Nikkor, they're going to die. They're going to die on the vine. They just don't put in nearly the kind of performance that you would think they do numerically. But what you see coming out of the lenses is completely different than the numbers dictate. It's completely different. And they said at one time, the Germans realized once upon a time that it's got nothing really to do with resolution on a lens. It's got everything to do with contrast. So they pushed the contrast as far as they could, and it's that contrast that gives it the appearance, quote unquote, of sharpness. It's not really sharper. Numerically, it's not. But it looks sharper, and it gives it that sort of three-dimensional, kind of pop, which is something I go for big time.
Well, back in the day when I'd look at those, I think Pop Photo would run these lens tests.
Yeah.
And they'd be all shooting the targets, right?
Sure.
And I had a really good friend who was shooting beauty at the time with some cheap lens that had gotten a terrible review on there. And I mentioned that to him. I said, he was shooting at the time that we were talking. He was actually on set for Harper's Bazaar shooting editorial on this 35. And I want to say it was like a Solagor or whatever.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And he said, he says, I've got the other lenses in my bag. He says, that's not the thing. This lens gives me the look I want. And I said something to him about the test target, and he put his camera down, and he looked at me kind of funny, and he goes, when I get a job to shoot a test target, I'll probably use that other lens. And I thought, well, yeah, okay. I guess he had a point. It was the I think in the case of that lens, it was the softness of the contrast.
Exactly.
And the presentation, the overall presentation, because his work was stunning.
I know.
Just stunning. And it was this old, I want to say Solagor. It could have been there were half a dozen different lenses back in those days.
Tamrons,
the early Tamrons, which were always fun because, like a box of chocolate, you never knew what you were going to get.
That's right.
I had a really good one, and my dad bought the same lens, and, well, he didn't get a really good one.
No, I know. There's a lot of variation. You would think that there isn't. No. But, and I thought these guys, pardon the expression, but I thought their arse was shooting stars when guys say, I bought a lens and I took it back 3 times and got another one, right? Well, I got a 70-200, I had a 70-200 2.8 original, a Canon 70-200 2.8, which was a really, really, really nice lens. And then at a certain point in time, I was downtown doing regrettably, a birthday party, and I put my backpack down on the sidewalk for 30 seconds, and I never had that lens again. And I also never had $14,000 worth of other camera gear. So, you think, you'd like to believe in the goodness of humanity. Nobody would take a working photographer's backpack. Guess what? They do. And I mean, after 22 years of shooting, I think that was 18 or 19, year 19, when it happened. You never think it's going to happen, but boy, do you go into shock when it does. I lost absolutely every piece of equipment I had except for a 5D and a 16-35. which meant that you weren't shooting an awful lot of portrait work
Nope.
when they call you, because I had to go out and buy all of that stuff over again, and none of it was insured.
Oh my.
Yeah. Well, one of the things was they said, well, did you have insurance? And I said, no, I didn't. And they said, you got to be kidding. Why wouldn't you have insurance on that stuff? I said, look, if you're careful, and I still stand by this, let's look at 22 years of $2,000 a year for commercial insurance on your camera gear. That's $40,000 plus. Okay, you've got $1,000 deductible on a backpack that's got $14,000 in. You're going to get maybe $13,000 to between $12,000 and $13,000 for replacement cost after you pay your deductible, and you've paid $40,000 for the privilege. It's a bad investment, right? So yeah, I strongly recommend people insure their stuff. I have content on it here in my apartment, but the minute I leave the apartment, I'm no longer insured, right? So I still don't have insurance on it, really. And honestly, if you're very, very careful, and you've got to, it's like babysitting. You can't let baby out of your, your point of view for 3 seconds flat, because you know what'll happen to baby if you do. You've always got to keep your eye on your gear and be sure that you've got, literally put your foot through a loop in the backpack if you need to. Never leave it in the vehicle, But if you're careful, and you have a very, very long career where you've never had anything go missing, you can save money in the long run, because up here commercial insurance is ridiculous. It really is. It's huge. It's $2,500 a year.
Yeah. Well, I totally get that.
My car is $900. So,
Wow.
and there's a lot less likely stuff to happen to my camera gear than my car.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's right.
Well, if you had to say something to somebody, just give them one word of advice. You've heard this question before.
Yeah.
What would that be?
Boy,
for young photographers, emerging photographers,
emerging photographers.
And I'm gonna preface that these guys and gals are photographers. They're not guys and gals who just bought a camera. They know how to use it. They know how to produce a shot. Okay.
Yeah.
But they're looking to get to the next place.
Well, 2 or 3 things I'd say. First of all, never let them. It's the old commercial. Never let them see you sweat. Don't talk about photography when you're shooting. I had some really good advice given to me a long time ago. Don't discuss photography when you're shooting. Talk about the weather. Talk about their kids. Talk about what breed of dog that they like the best. Don't talk about photography, because they said the minute you start getting into the semantics of what you're doing, you're pulling all the mystery out of it. And why you get paid reasonably well is to keep it a mystery. Doctors don't sit there and go, okay, now your kidneys, and they just go, look, here's how it is. Let's get it done, right? They don't sit down and say, okay, when I get a blood test, this is what I go looking for, right? You don't take the mystery out of it. You leave the mystery in, right? Second of all, I also heard a long time ago, and regrettably that's the way it is, probably 15% of the photographers out there make 90% of the money, because they just happen to fall in. There's the Chase Jarvises out there, and there's the Gregory Heislers out there, and I've seen many of these guys, and they've never lost their love of it, but they did it for one reason. They were passionate about it, and they learned to take that passion and turn it into something that was workable, right?
Right.
And they never, ever, ever, ever gave up on it. Well, myself, the most important thing really is you've got to be infallible with your stuff. You can't, when you go out to a shoot, when you go out to see a client, you absolutely have to guarantee yourself, more important than guaranteeing the client. You've got to guarantee yourself that you can come back with the goods, that you can always bring the goods home. You've got it. And if there's any doubt about it, then you're not quite ready. Okay?
That's
you're
right.
Gonna get,
that goes back to that hitting a home run every time.
You're expected to, right? And there's an absolute elegance and I can't put it in any finer terms. There's an elegance to going out and saying, whenever I get in the car and I go shoot something, there's a superb feeling of comfort and elegance to go out there and know that whatever you do, you're going to bring back what you were sent out to get. Absolutely going to bring back what you were sent out to get.
Yep. I remember.
And if you can do that, yeah, and not having to worry about it, right?
Yep.
And that's not acquired immediately. That takes a little bit of time to come by. I remember I used to teach years and years and years ago. I used to teach guitar, and there was a book called A Modern Method for Guitar by William G. Levitt, and it was the Berklee School of Music guitar curriculum. And he had a couple of pieces of advice in the introduction, and he said it's important to understand that the most important thing about learning to play guitar is it's an accumulative process, And I'd never met anybody that was born a photographer, a fully qualified, ready-to-go photographer. I've never met anybody in my life, and I can guarantee you I never will. It's all on account of an accumulative process. And the more you accumulate, the better you get. The better you get, the better you feel about where you're at, and the more likely you are to do a better job next time.
Photography, especially commercial photography, is an experiential-based business.
Exactly.
The more experience you have doing what we do, the more opportunity you will have to hit that home run.
That's right.
And I think where a lot of photographers find it challenging is that they don't have the time, or they're trying to fit it in on the weekends, and they're competing against people who shoot, I want to say every day, but many. I'm looking at the output from some of the photographers that I follow. These guys are shooting every day, and if they're not shooting for a client, they're shooting for themselves.
That's right. One of the most valuable pieces of advice I ever got was from a guy. He was. I'm going to plug in pretty quick here. I'm down to about 27%, and I don't want to die. Okay, so I'm going to plug in and just make sure that this is still charging. There's a guy named, and he's a wonderful guy. And I have 80-20 rules for everything in life. 20% of the guys will tell you anything and take you anywhere. And of those 20% of the guys, they'll say, I'll tell you what, Don, I'll pick you up at 5 in the morning. We'll take you out. I'm going to put your tripod in exactly the same position mine was at exactly the same time I shot this last weekend, and you'll be able to get the same shot. And then there's the other 80% of the guys. They'll go, look, I had to figure it out. That's your problem. I'm not telling you anything, and I've run into those guys. You could say, boy, that's a fabulous tree. I love trees. I'd like to go shoot that. Where is it? I'm not telling, and I've seen it happen. I'm not telling. You got to figure it out yourself. Go shoot your own tree. That's my tree. Like it would make any difference, right? Anyway, the long and the short of it is there's a guy named Cliff Hollenbeck, Hollenbeck.
Yep.
And Cliff was a travel photographer, and I actually had the rare opportunity to go visit him when he was in town. And I phoned him and I said, look, I'm going to Phoenix. I didn't know you then. I said, I'm going to Phoenix. I have to do a shoot in Las Vegas, but I'm going to go down to Phoenix and meet a guy, and then we're going to drive to Vegas, shoot some boudoir stuff. And I said, but I got a layover in Seattle, and Cliff lived in Seattle. And I said, can I spend an hour or two with you? He said, sure. We'll pick you up at the airport, and we'll bring you home. We can have a bite to eat, and I'll show you around. I went downstairs to where he stored his slides, and it was all shot on slide. And he had 3 drawer filing cabinets that were about 4.5 to 5 feet high, full. And he had a wall full of them, and I'm talking 15, 20 cabinets full of transparency film. And he'd traveled all over the world, and he'd been everywhere. I mean, absolutely everywhere. Wow. And I said, so what are you up to, Cliff? And he said, well, right now, I'm going to, we're going to go to do a Caribbean cruise, and I'm teaching photography on the cruise. And then after the Caribbean cruise is over, he said, we're going to Tuscany, and I'm trying to persuade my wife to never come home. He said, I've never been any place in my life like Tuscany in Italy. He said, it's the most beautiful place you'll ever go. And this is from a guy who's been absolutely everywhere. Mm-hmm. And he said, and after that, after Tuscany, we're doing a Mediterranean cruise where I'm teaching photography as well on the cruise for 2 or 3 weeks. Then we're going to Northern California. We're going to do winery tours. I'm going to shoot wineries and teach photography there. Plus, I'm working on a book on wineries. Okay. And he said, and then hopefully we'll get a chance to go home. And this guy's shot for some pretty big clients, Alaska Airlines, stuff like that. He's a really, really, really nice guy. Voted American Society of Travel Photographers, voted their photographer of the year quite a few years. And so he said, that's what I'm up to. And I showed him my previous website, and I said, well, this is my new website. I just thought I'd get some input from you. And the very first thing he said to me was, he said, this is really good. I don't see your personal work. Where's your personal work? I said, okay, I'm busted. There's no personal work on it. There's shots that I like personally, but there's no work that I've done personally that's on the website. He said, big mistake, big mistake. He said, first and foremost, do your personal work first. He said, the rest of the stuff is gravy. He said, your personal work is the gas in your engine. It's the fire in the fireplace. And if you're not producing personal work that really gets you off, you're going to lose passion for it in no time.
He's so absolutely right. So absolutely right.
Yep. Absolutely. Never forgot that.
So, John, I'm gonna thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And words of wisdom for sure.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it. I'm sure the folks out at watching on Lighting Essentials appreciate it. And more than everybody, y'all can go see John's work at sharpshots.com.
Yeah, that's with an E.
What's that? With an E.
That's
sure.
E. Yeah, SHAR.
Shots.com, and see his blog and send him a note if you like the interview. John, thank you very much. I will talk to you soon.
You bet. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.